So today we will continue our discussion on the Shikshashtakam, which I have been taking for the last few sessions whenever I have been here. We discussed last time the third text of the Shikshashtakam, Trunadapi Sunichena. So today I'll discuss the fourth text, Dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagdisha kamaye ama janmani janmanishware bhavatat bhaktirahetuki tvai. So this verse expresses a very lofty sentiment, and I'm utterly unqualified to speak on this topic. Still, as a service to the tradition, I'll try to explain this verse in its context and in the way in which it can be applicable in our life. The Shikshashtakam is a set of verses that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu composed towards the end of his life. And in it, in a devotionally riveting way, he captures the most important themes of bhakti. Now, to understand this verse, let's look at what comes before and what comes after. The previous verse talks about humility and concludes in Kirtaniya Sadahari. That thus, when a person is humble, when a person is tolerant, when a person is respectful, at that time they can constantly glorify the Lord. So we discussed last time that Kirtan is not just the utterance of the holy names, it is a life devoted to the glorification of the Lord. And the next text, Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram, that text talks about how it's a fervent call to the Lord to lift one out of material existence. So that means this verse is like a transition between absorption in the Lord and liberation from material existence. So this verse, at first glance, it appears to focus more on what is to be given up. There are three na in it. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim. And actually there's a fourth also, va. Like if you make a list, we may put or as the last object. We have 4 items. The first 3 are separated by commas. Then last there is or. So va is like or. So na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim refers to I don't want wealth. I don't want followers, janam. I don't want sundarim. I don't want the association of sexually enjoyable objects. And kavitam va jagdisha kamaye. Kavitam, this can either be an adjective that describes what comes earlier, or it can be a noun in its own right. So kavitam, if it is treated as an adjective, that means I don't want Sundari who is glorified by poetry, the exquisitely beautiful sense objects. Or kavitam can refer, if it's taken as a noun, it can refer to Kavi is a learned person, a poet more specifically, but generally a learned person. So I do not want to be known as a learned person. I do not want this fame of being very scholarly, very erudite. Kavitam va jagadish kamaye. This is not what I desire, O Lord. Jagadish. So, Isha means controller, Jagat is universe. So, O universal controller. This name is significant here because this form of address conveys that these blessings, Dhan, Jana, Sundari and Kavitam, these are benedictions that are available in this world. And Krishna is the controller of this world. That implies that Krishna is capable of giving these blessings. And yet, no, I do not want these. And then what do I want? Mama janmani janmanishware. For lifetime after lifetime, bhavatat bhaktirahetuki tvai. Bhavatat. In Sanskrit, the second person reference has 2 ways. In English, we just say you for everyone. Whether it's a child or it's an elderly respectable person, it's all you. But in Hindi, we have tu and aap. So aap is a more respectful second person address. So like that in Sanskrit, there is tvam and bhavan. So tvam is like tu. Bhavan is like aap. So Bhavatat, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is using with respectful second person address. Bhaktir ahaituki tvai. What I want is ahaituki, unmotivated. Ahaituki tvai. Bhakti which is unmotivated. So the point of the verse is not the rejection, not the negation, that I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. The point is the acceptance. What I want is Bhavatat Bhaktir Ahaituki Tvai. Now, the process of bhakti is primarily a process of change of desires. That normally bhakti is thought of as emotion. Now when we go in front of the Lord, we feel some sweet feeling in the heart. We feel some strong emotions when we hear the kirtans or when we associate with devotees, go to holy places. Bhakti is, by some people, it's thought of as emotion. Now, Srila Prabhupada was careful not to let bhakti be thought of as only as emotion. So that's why he translated bhakti as not just devotion, but devotional service. So service connotes the idea of action. When we are doing service, there are some actions we do. I do this, I don't do that. We try basically, when we are doing service, we try to please others, please the object of our service. And that pleasing is done through actions. So if you consider devotional service, devotion has the idea of emotion in it, and service has the idea of action in it. Now, actually speaking, if we look at our subtle mind and how it works, now there is thinking, there is feeling, and there is willing. So, if we consider how sometimes in hilly areas where snow falls, so when the snow falls, the snow at the top of the mountain might just be a small ball. But as the snow keeps rolling down, it acquires more and more snow. And that snowball which is this big, it eventually becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And when the snowball was at the top, a person could just have kicked it and the snowball would have cracked. But by the time the snowball comes to the ground, by that time, it may have become so big that a whole person can be rolled over by the snowball, knocked down completely and rolled over. So what has happened? It is a same snowball, but as it has come down, it has not only acquired momentum, but it has also acquired mass. Not only is while coming down it has become faster and faster and faster, but it has also taken more and more snow to it. And that's how it acquired greater and greater mass. So similarly is how our inner thought processes grow. When something comes originally, it is a thought. At the level of a thought, it is just like a tiny snowball. We see something, we hear something, and maybe something stirs up from our past memories. At that time, it is like a small snowball. At that time, we can decide whether I'm going to invest thought in this or I'm not going to invest thought in it. Whether I'm going to think more about this or not. Now, the more we think about it, whether it is a perception coming from the senses externally or whether it is a recollection coming from the past from our memory, when we start thinking about it, then by our thinking, we make it grow. So if we consider our consciousness to be like the slope of that mountain. So at the top of the mountain is the thought. At the bottom of the mountain is the intention. So there is thought, there is emotion, and there is intention. And from the intention, action will automatically come. Once we decide to do something, then we will do it soon. Maybe immediately it may not work out, but it will work out. So at the level of thought, it's relatively easy. Okay, this thought has come, but I won't think about it. But by the time it comes to the level of emotion, we start thinking, hey, if I do this, it will feel so nice. If I touch this, if I eat this, if I do this, if I do that. Once we start getting into the level of feelings, things become stronger. And when they become stronger, resisting them becomes much tougher. And then by the time it comes to the level of intentions. So once it comes to the level of intentions, that means the inner war is over and we have lost the inner war. Of course, I am talking about desires which are self-defeating in this case. There can be other kinds of desires also, which are good desires. In that case, it's a very positive thing to come to the level of intentions. But right now, because the first half of this verse is focusing on no, so let's try to analyze that. So, now when by the time the thought process has grown and it has come to the level of intention, by that time it has become like a giant snowball, which is almost impossible to stop. It's not entirely impossible, and we'll come to that a little later. But its momentum has become formidable by that time. So, at the level of intention, the action is soon going to follow. So, now the force of gravity, if there is a hill, the force of gravity is always going to be there. And gravity itself can't be stopped. If the snow is formed on top, the snow is going to flow down. And it flows down, it is going to form snowballs. So in that sense, this process of thinking, feeling and willing, that itself can't be stopped. Sripad Ramanujacharya, in his Bhagavad Gita commentary, he takes these Sthita Prajna verses. There is 2.54 to 2.72. These 19 verses in the Bhagavad Gita are sometimes called the Sthita Prajna verses. Sthita Prajna means they describe the characteristics of one who is fixed in knowledge. Prajna means intelligence or knowledge or wisdom. Sthita means fixed. So Arjuna's question begins with the specific word itself in 2.54 when he says Sthita Pragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stitadhi kim prabhaseta kimasita vrajeta kim. So Sthita Pragyasya ka bhasha. So now here when Krishna is asked this question by Arjuna, we have to look at it carefully. Sthita Prajna, that's a person who is fixed in knowledge. Ka bhasha. Now if we look at words only from the external perspective, bhasha means what is his language? Which language does he speak in? Pragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava. One is situated in samadhi. Sitadhi kim prabhasheta. And how does such a person speak? Kimasi tavrajeta kim. How does such a person sit? How does such a person walk? Now, there is often a tendency in scripture, when we study scripture, if we take everything literally, then we often miss out on the deeper import of scripture. So here if we take everything literally, kimasi tavrajeta kim. How does such a person sit? How does such a person walk? Now Krishna is Arjuna asking Krishna about a fashion model. How does such a person sit? How does a person? What is the gait of such a person? How does such a person walk? Or is it that self-realized people have some special language in which they communicate with each other? Ka bhasha. What is the language? Is it that if we see some person speaking constantly in Sanskrit, then we should understand, oh, this person is self-realized. And the person speaks in some Leche language like English, that means that person is not self-realized. So what is Krishna being asked here by Arjuna? The Pragyasya ka bhasha. So Baldev Vidyabhushan explains that here the word bhasha, we have to understand what it means in this context. We cannot just look at the literal meaning of bhasha as language. We have to go to the etymology. Etymology is the origin of the words. And it says bhasha, it comes from bhashyate iti bhasha. That which describes is called as bhasha. So language is a tool which we use to describe things. We describe people, describe objects, describe emotions. So bhasha can be applied to the tool that is used to describe things. But Baldev Vidyabhushan says that bhasha can be used to describe also that which is described using the tool. So the symptoms. Bhasha can mean that which describes, or it can also mean that which is described. So Sthita Pragyasya ka bhasha means what are the symptoms, that which will be described by bhasha. So what are the characteristics of a self-realized person? The pragyasya ka bhasha. And sitadhi kim prabhashe. When it is asked, how does such a person speak? This refers not to the accent of the person, not to the tone of the person. It refers to the overall way in which a person expresses one's emotions in this world. So how does a person respond to the ups and downs of life in terms of speech? Kim prabhasheta and kim asita vrajeta kim. So how does a person sit and how does a person walk? So here Arjuna asked this question not literally in terms of sitting and walking, but he says sitting represents inactivity of our senses. Now when we sit, our senses are no longer active. And when we walk, our senses are referred to generally in terms of legs. Sometimes we have to always remember that the Bhagavad Gita is a poetry. So we recite the shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita, they are very beautiful when we recite them. But in the process of studying the Bhagavad Gita, we may forget that it is a poetry. And poetry means there are always poetic ornaments that are used. So for example, if we have a factory, in the factory, the employer may ask, so how many hands do we have? Now it's not that they have only hands working over there, they have people working over there. But if it's a factory which involves manual work, then they will ask how many hands do we have? So their hands represent the full person. So hands are a non-literal or metaphorical way to refer to the full person. Similarly, here, kim asita vrajeta kim. How does a person sit and how does a person walk? This is used in this context, the legs, which are either inactive when we are sitting or which are active when we are walking. The legs are used to represent the senses. So, kim asita, how does such a person sit? Means how does such a person keep the senses inactive? That means keep the senses under control. And vrajeta kim, how does such a person walk? That means walking is engagement of the senses. So how does such a person engage the senses? So these are the questions that Arjuna asks. So the point I was making by quoting this verse and this section is that Ramanujacharya analyzes this growth from thinking, feeling and willing. And he says the process of bhakti is essentially a spiritualization of these inner thought processes. Different acharyas in different traditions have defined bhakti differently. We have the Vedanta Sutra of Jaimini, Vedanta Sutra of Badarayana, of Vyasadeva, which begins with Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Now let us inquire what is Brahma. What is the spiritual reality Brahman? Similarly, Shandilya is a great sage. He has written a Bhakti Sutra. And that Bhakti Sutra begins with the question or with the exhortation Athato Bhakti Jigyasa. Now let us inquire about Bhakti. What is Bhakti? And in the process of, after raising this question, Athato Bhakti Jigyasa, let us inquire what is Bhakti. Then Narad Muni, actually the Narad Bhakti Sutra is written in the plural first reference. I am saying this, I may say I am giving this class. But if say there are two speakers over here, we may say we will talk on this topic. So the Narad Bhakti Sutra uses this plural self-reference. And the reason for that is, the Acharyas explain that Narad Bhakti Sutra has been written or has been put in written form not by Narad Muni but by his disciples. So Narad Muni just spoke it and his disciples are writing it on his behalf. So there is a Narad Bhakti Sutra. The Narad Bhakti Sutra also starts similarly. Chandilya Bhakti Sutra also starts similarly. And Athato Bhakti Jigyasa, when it says, then after that it describes the various definitions of bhakti. It says this sage says this sage says this sage says this. Like that, different definitions of bhakti are given. So, of course, in our tradition, Rupa Goswami has defined bhakti as, Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma adyanavratam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttama. So he describes that having no other intention, abhilashita, anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma adyanavratam, giving up jnana and karma, anukulyena krishnanu shilanam, cultivation that is favorable to Krishna, that is what he calls as bhakti. So Ramacharya, on the other hand, talks about bhakti in terms of spiritualization of one's thinking, feeling and willing. And he analyzes these verses from 2.55 onwards to 2.72 in a hierarchy. And he describes how these verses describe a progressively increasing state of absorption in Krishna. So we talked about this snowball at the top moving down and becoming bigger and irresistible as it acquires more and more momentum. So something similar can happen in our relationship with Krishna also. Initially we may have just a desire, maybe I should go to a temple, maybe I should go to Katha, maybe I should go to Kirtan Mela. That's just a thought. And from thought, maybe we call some other devotee friends and ask them, what do you think? I'm planning to go to this yatra. Should we go? Yeah, it's a very good yatra. It'll be wonderful if you come. And we hear that, and then thought becomes a desire. And from the desire, it becomes an intention. And then when we go for a pilgrimage, we associate with devotees, we hear katha, we see the holy places, and we get spiritual experiences. And our heart becomes transformed, our life becomes transformed. This is what I want to do. So what happens? That cycle, so the snowball comes down and then it again goes up, because we always keep thinking things, we always keep desiring things, and we keep intending to do things. That's how we move onwards closer and closer to Krishna, and thus we ultimately become absorbed in Krishna. Now, if we consider the mountain, sometimes mountains also have paths. So if a river, if a stream or a small body of water, a tributary is flowing down, as it keeps flowing down, then it creates a path for itself. So the water can go down from anywhere by the force of gravity. But if a bed or a path has been created, the water flows down that path. And in our consciousness, we all have certain paths that are charted out already. And our consciousness naturally moves down that path. So the most prominent among the paths along which our consciousness moves from thinking through feeling to willing, the most common among them are these four: Dhana, Jana, Sundari and Kavita. These are all pathways down which our consciousness moves very quickly. Why? Because that has been a path created by our past patterns of thinking, feeling and willing. So that's why when some thought of wealth comes in the mind, as soon as the thought comes, immediately the mind accelerates. And we often, when discussions about money come up, it is not that we have to concentrate and think. We just get immediately caught in it, immediately absorbed in it. Why? Because that is a groove, that is a path that is already there in our consciousness. So similarly, Jana, when somebody praises us, somebody glorifies us, immediately our ears become big. We hear everything, what they are saying. So now in our life, these four, Dhana, Jana, Sundari, Kavita, all of these are grooves which are there in our consciousness. And at different times, we have to battle with different channels of consciousness that move along these grooves. So for us, at different times in our life, sometimes the desire for dhana may become predominant in our consciousness. And most of our thoughts just go around money, how will I get money, how will I get money, how will I get money. Sometimes it may be, we may just be caught in prestige considerations. No, should I? If I do this, what will people think of me? If I do this, then everybody will praise me. So our whole thought process can become dominated by one particular thing. And the process of bhakti is not so much of rejection as it is of connection. Usually we talk in terms of attachment and detachment. Attachment means we are consumed by something. Just can't think of anything other than that thing. And we think that the opposite of attachment is detachment. And we may want to feel that because I'm attached, I suffer so much. If I became detached, then things would be nice. However, bhakti is neither a process of attachment nor a process of detachment. It is a process of commitment. Anushilanam. Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktiruttama. Shilanam means cultivation. Cultivation, the word cultivate normally we use in a farm, or a garden, where there are small seeds, the ground has to be plowed, seeds have to be sown, then they have to be watered, and then they grow up. So this requires conscious, careful action. And similarly, the process of bhakti, whether we consider Rupa Goswami's definition of cultivation, or whether we consider Ramacharya's explanation of the spiritualization of our thinking, feeling, willing, both involve a committed level of action. That is, attachment means something towards which our thoughts go naturally because we like that thing, because we enjoy that thing. Detachment means we are not emotionally involved in it. We don't feel any emotions about it. For example, say in India, cricket is a very popular sport. But say hockey is not such a popular sport. So, if India loses a cricket match, immediately our emotions get agitated. But if India loses a hockey match, it doesn't matter much. So here it is this, one is attachment, the other is detachment. So when attachment is there, emotions flow naturally, almost irresistibly. When there is detachment, there is no emotional involvement at all. And that's why one doesn't care for it. But commitment means that one doesn't rely on one's emotional state. One doesn't rely on one's emotions, but rather one acts based on one's intentions. This is what I want to do in my life. This is where I want to go. Whether I feel like it or I don't feel like it. This is what I'm going to do. So, I was speaking about how devotional service, in devotion talks about the emotion and service talks about the action. But thinking, feeling, willing and an action. There is cognition, there is emotion, there is intention and then there is action. Now among these, bhakti is signified. So devotional service means, when we talk about devotion as emotion, that refers to the second stage emotion. Service refers to the fourth stage of action. So there is cognition, which is thought, there is emotion, second stage. So from cognition, when we think about something, from there our thoughts grow, and then we start feeling emotions in connection with them. And after that, we start thinking that I'll do something about this. Because this feels so good, I'm going to do something about it. That's intention. And then after that, we do it. Now, thoughts are random. Now, there are so many sources from which thoughts may come, externally and internally, that to control them is almost impossible. But along with thoughts are emotions. They come when we invest in the thoughts. And further, when we invest our consciousness in the thoughts, they go to the level of intentions. So if we think of purification primarily in terms of that I should have no thoughts other than thoughts of Krishna, that will be like a impossibly lofty level of aspiration. We live in this world, and while we are living in this world, we naturally have to think of hundreds of things. Even Bhishma Pitama, who the Bhagavatam describes as as a Mahabhagavat, as an exalted pure devotee, who is one of the 12 Mahajanas, the those who are considered in the Bhagavatam as the topmost devotees. What does he say? It is when he is about to die, he is about to leave his body, he is in an arrow bed, he has instructed Yudhishthira Maharaj elaborately about various subjects, and then he says at that point, Iti matir upakalpita vitrushna. He says, now I withdraw my consciousness. Prabhupada translates that as thinking, feeling and willing. He says, now I will withdraw my thinking, feeling, willing from various subjects and fix it on the Supreme Lord. Now this may raise the question, is it that his thinking, feeling, willing were not invested in Krishna earlier? If they were not invested in Krishna, then how is he a Mahabhagavat? How is he a Mahajan? And if they're already invested in Krishna, then what does it mean when he says, I am withdrawing my thinking, feeling, willing and fixing it in Krishna? So here, the context, if we see what was discussed before this verse and what is discussed after this verse, this is 1.8.32. What is discussed before, what is discussed, 1.9.32 actually. So what is discussed before is that Yudhishthira Maharaj and Bhishma Pitamaha are discussing about Raj Dharma, about how to administer a kingdom. And when a kingdom is to be administered, it's a serious business. Now Bhishma Pitama doesn't just tell at that time, chant Hare Krishna and everything will be done. He actually gives practical instructions, what a king's duties are, what a minister's duties are, what a warrior's duties are. He analyzes things and there is serious question answers. So when we are discussing about various subjects in this world, in intent we are doing it all for the purpose of serving Krishna. But in practical action, we do have to think about the subjects that we are doing. If we don't think about those subjects, we will not be able to do those subjects well. A devotee artist once asked Srila Prabhupada, when I am painting about Krishna, at that time, often I am thinking more about the painting than about Krishna. Because if we actually go into painting, any field we go deep into that, there are so many subtleties with respect to the artistry of painting. So what do we do? So is it, I am painting about Krishna but I am not thinking about Krishna. So what was Prabhupada's reply? Prabhupada's reply was that when Arjuna was fighting the Kurukshetra war, it is not that he was worrying constantly, am I thinking of Krishna, am I thinking of Krishna. He was focusing on fighting the war. Now the war was being fought for the purpose of Krishna. So in our normal conduct of affairs, it is not that devotees are meant to live like with a split personality disorder. Now at one level, I am talking with my family members, I am talking with my colleagues. At another level, half of my head is thinking about Krishna. No, when we are focusing on something, we absorb ourselves in that thing. So Arjuna, when he was fighting the war, if we look at the descriptions of the war given in the Mahabharata, Arjuna is completely focused. And war is a matter of life or death. We'll be fighting with one warrior here, but arrows can come from different places. Not all the warriors at that time were following the Kshatriya codes. So the point is, bhakti, while we are living in this world, when we say we should always think of Krishna, what it means primarily is that our intent is always to serve Krishna through whatever we do, whether it is our family responsibilities, whether it is our professional responsibilities. We are always intending to serve Krishna. And now this intention to always serve Krishna cannot survive for very long without a direct connection with Krishna. That means if we don't take time out to chant the holy names, if we don't take time to study scripture, if we don't take time out to associate with devotees, then this intention for serving Krishna itself will not stay. So we need time for exclusive focus on Krishna. But in the routine course of our life, we cannot have that exclusive focus on Krishna constantly. So Bhishma Pitama, he is always, in his intention, he was always a fixed devotee of Krishna. But in his actions, he was doing many other things. And in this particular situation, when he saw that death is right now coming close to me, then he says, Itimatir upakalpita vitrishna. Now I withdraw all my consciousness. My mati, which is whatever cravings might have been there in it, because of which that was going in different directions, let me withdraw it now. Let me withdraw it and let me focus on Krishna. Let me focus it wholeheartedly on Krishna. So this verse of Shikshashtakam is also expressing a similar intention. Dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagadisha kamaye. Says these are the various tracks along which our consciousness normally moves. Dhana jana sundari kavita. He says, now I will not let my consciousness move along those tracks. Instead of that, what will I do? Mama janmani janmanishware bhavatad bhakti rahetukitai. I want to practice your bhakti. And here the word ahetuki is significant because many times people do bhakti for getting these things. Dhana, jana, sundari, kavita. So what happens is, although that may not seem to be the direct action, but that is the desire underlying that action. So he says, no, I am not practicing that kind of bhakti. I want to be devoted to you only for your sake. And this level of selflessness is further stressed with the declaration Janmani Janmani. So actually in the broad Vedic tradition there were two paths, or rather three paths. There is a path of karma and there is a path of jnana. The path of karma focuses on enjoying this world. This world is so wonderful, if I can just make the arrangements, then I will be able to enjoy it. The path of jnana focuses on rejection. It says, oh, this world is a dangerous place, we should all reject it. But bhakti goes beyond this dialectic of acceptance for enjoyment and rejection because of lack of enjoyment. So, the first four things that are talked about, dhana, jana, kavita, sundari, kavita, all these things refer to the fruits of the path of karma. On the path of karma, one does dharma to get these things. I get dharma so that I'll have wealth, I get dharma so that I'll have popularity, I get dharma so that I'll have a very happy family life, and these sort of things. Now, these in itself are not bad, but they can be distractions from the spiritual path, and usually they become distractions. So, on one side, he's rejecting all the fruits of the path of karma. And now, most often, when people reject the path of karma, then they go to the path of jnana. In the path of jnana, what is the idea? Oh, this world is such a dangerous place. This world is such a place of misery. I simply want to get out of it. This is, of course, a very much better desire than desiring to enjoy the things of this world. But still, this is also a self-centered desire. Whether I enjoy or I suffer, the focus is still on I. And that's why that jnana, or that sort of attraction for or obsession with mukti, obsession with liberation, is considered to be pratikul to bhakti. It is considered to be unfavorable to bhakti. And is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's declaration, Mama Janmani Janmanishware. And I am ready to go through this world for many more lifetimes if Bhavatad Bhakti Rahetukite. Or what I want for you is your unmotivated devotional service. But that means he is also rejecting the path of jnana. He is rejecting the path of karma, rejecting the path of jnana, and he is saying, I want to simply practice your bhakti. Ahaituki tvai. At our level, this kind of practice of ahaituki bhakti may seem so exalted as to be practically impossible. So the important thing at our level of practice is to keep practicing. Now sometimes we put bhakti at such a high pedestal that we don't get connected with the process of bhakti at all. So we cannot become pure devotees without becoming devotees. We cannot become pure devotees without becoming devotees. I cannot become a first ranking student without becoming a student. So failing is an inevitable part of learning and growing and achieving. And sometimes what happens is, we think that I should only practice pure devotional service. But then that I will not have any material desires, I will not pray to Krishna for anything material, I will pray to Krishna only for spiritual things. That way I will keep my bhakti pure. But in that process, thinking that I will not pray to Krishna for anything material, but at our level of life, material things do matter to us. Now our health matters, our family situation matters, our financial situation matters. And if we say, I will not pray to Krishna about these things, then what happens is, a major part of our heart stays unconnected with Krishna. Because these things do occupy a major part of our heart. So when in aspiring for pure devotion, we don't even access devotion. Because that concept of pure devotion is largely at our stage a very idealized conception that has very little to do with our practical life. So there is pure devotion and there is potential pure devotion. Potential pure devotion means that a devotee may not have pure desires right now, but the devotee has an intention for pure desires. And how those intentions are translated into action, that may vary according to time, place, circumstance. So the important point in bhakti is to connect our heart with Krishna. So at this stage, if we say, oh, but I cannot reject dhanam, I cannot reject janam, I cannot reject sundari, I cannot reject kavita. These are desires that are there in my heart, and we cannot just artificially wish them away. So the important point is, these no's are for the purpose of the yes. Bhavatad bhakti rahaitu kitvai. So now the yes is not dependent on the no. The yes to Krishna is not dependent on the no to Maya. The yes to Krishna can be said even when we are not able to say no to Maya. What that means is that all of us, I'll conclude with this point, that if we consider our desires, our subtle thought process, thinking, feeling, willing, now we all go through phases. So sometimes, say, lust suddenly peaks up. Sometimes greed suddenly peaks up. Now, this peak is spiking. If we consider electrical spike, the spiking of desires, it happens intermittently. The desires may be troubling us, maybe it's hovering in the background constantly, but intermittently they become very high. And when they become high, it may seem as if it's impossible to resist them. Now the problem that happens is that when the desires become very strong and we end up doing something which we should not be doing. So after that has come, the desire has come and desire has gone, and we have done something undesirable. After that, we keep thinking about the same thing. Why did I do that? 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 And then again the time passes, again another spike comes up. So again another spike comes up, we succumb, and again after that, when the desire is not so agitated, still we are thinking, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I do that? So here what is happening, either way, when the desire is strong or when we are beating ourselves up for having indulged in the desire, in both cases, quite often, we are not conscious of Krishna. We are conscious of the mind. The mind, in our inner world, it often plays a very dangerous double role. Now first, the mind makes us do a criminal act, makes us like a criminal, makes us do wrong. And then the same mind which makes us do wrong, it becomes a judge and punishes us. Why did you do this? You are such a fool, you are such a stupid person, you are this, you are that, you are that, you are fallen, you are like degraded, this, that. And either way, while we are indulging or while we are beating ourselves up for indulging, in both cases, we are simply conscious of the mind. We are not conscious of Krishna. And that way, we get just caught in self-centeredness. I am able to do this, I am not able to do this. Now certainly the feeling that I am not able to serve Krishna properly, that is a feeling that is favorable to bhakti. But when I am not able to serve Krishna properly, the focus should be on Krishna, the focus should not be on I. So when what I said, the point I was making here is, the yes to Krishna doesn't depend on the no to Maya. Yes, we do have to follow certain basic principles, but the point is that there are some times when we may just not be able to say no to Maya. The desires may just spike up and they may overwhelm us at that time. But what do we do in between? There is one spike of desire, maybe after a few days, after a few weeks, after some time another spike of desire comes. What do we do in between? If at that time we still have the facility to say yes to Krishna, at that time we still have the facility to absorb ourselves in Krishna, and if we use that, so we may not be able to say no to Maya when these desires spike up, but during the rest of the time we can say yes to Krishna. And saying yes to Krishna during that time does not depend on our capacity to say no to Krishna, no to Maya at other times. Because the more we focus on saying yes to Krishna when we can, the more we become connected with Krishna. And the more we become connected with Krishna, the more we become purified. And the more we become purified, the more our capacity to say no to Maya also increases. And that's how it is not that our yes to Krishna depends on our no to Maya, rather our no to Maya depends on our yes to Krishna. When we consistently say yes to Krishna, irrespective of what happens in certain phases, then by that yes to Krishna, by the resulting purification, our capacities to say no to Maya become stronger. So, bhavatad bhaktir ahetuki tvai. So this whole verse moves towards that conclusion. My dear Lord, let my devotion flow towards you. And that is what we can aspire for. If we focus on what we have to give up, what we have to say no to, we may become so overwhelmed thinking that this is so impractical that I just can't do it. But we focus on connecting with Krishna in whatever way we can. Now we can always come in the association of devotees, we can always chant the holy names, we can always study scripture. And these are things which these may not seem to be like life-changing things. We may think, if I make a resolution, never again will I indulge in sense gratification. There is such a big resolution. I've done something special, I feel like that. But what happens is, our bhakti is not defined by such special moments of great resolution. It is defined much more by our routine moments, what we do day to day, moment to moment in our life. So the more we focus on connecting with Krishna, the more our bhakti will become peaceful and joyful. Because saying no is usually not pleasant, in whatever situation it is. But saying yes to Krishna is pleasant. It makes our mind peaceful, it makes us joyful because we connect with Krishna. And then whenever the temptations come, we'll be in a better position to say no to Maya. So I'll summarize. I started by talking about how this text, the fourth text of Shikshashtakam, is between the previous text which talks about constant glorification of Krishna and the next text which talks about liberation from material existence by complete surrender to Krishna. So it talks about how one moves from absorption in Krishna towards liberation from material existence. And this involves primarily the absorption of our consciousness in Krishna. So Ramacharya says that bhakti means spiritualization of our thinking, feeling and willing. And the central metaphor of this class was the snowball. Now snowball at the top is easily breakable. Snowball at the bottom, it will break us easily. And so snowball at the level, at the top of the hill is like thinking. As it rolls down, it becomes feeling, desiring. As it comes right to the bottom, it becomes willing, intention. So there are certain tracks along which the snowballs in our consciousness keep moving repeatedly. They are Dhana, Jana, Sundari, Kavita. And these are the tracks on which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, I don't want my consciousness to move. But the focus is consciousness cannot be kept stagnant. Consciousness has to move. So there's a desirable track along which that consciousness can move, and that desirable track is the track of bhakti. So I discussed as a slight tangent how Sita Pragyasya Ka Bhasha, that verse doesn't talk about literal how one sits and how one walks, but metaphorically it talks about how one restrains one's senses and how one engages one's senses. And the whole sequence of those verses, as analyzed by Ramacharya, the focus is on increasingly absorbing ourselves, our thinking, feeling and willing in Krishna. So normally speaking, in our day-to-day life, we cannot be constantly absorbed in Krishna. We can try to have constantly the intention of serving Krishna in whatever we do. But there are need to sustain that intention. We need also times when we specifically withdraw our consciousness from everything else and focus it on Krishna. And that's what Bhishma Pitama does at the end of his life, when he knows that now I am about to depart. And lastly, we discussed about how the process of bhakti, there are two things in this, is saying no to both the paths of karma and jnana, no to worldly benefits and no to otherworldly liberation. Its focus is simply on devotion to Krishna. But in the bhakti, there are these two. In the practice of bhakti, there is this saying no to Maya and there is saying yes to Krishna. So we shouldn't make our yes to Krishna dependent on our no to Maya. Even when we are not able to say no to Maya because desires sometimes spike up, rather than just getting obsessed over those desires and worrying and beating ourselves up, why did I not do that? Why did I fall like that? Why did I do that wrong? We can focus on, whenever we have the capacity, connect with Krishna. And it is not the no to Maya which makes yes to Krishna possible. It is the yes to Krishna which makes the no to Maya possible. And by focusing on the yes to Krishna, we will make our bhakti peaceful and joyful. So thank you very much.